Hola, hola a todos quienes se están uniendo. Buen día, buen jueves a todas
Good
y a
morning and
todos.
welcome to everyone who's joining us. Welcome to session number 2 of the Academy of Energy Transition. We are going to start in a couple of minutes as we wait for other students to join us. Also, we are having streaming on YouTube Live. I would like to remind you as well to join our WhatsApp chat, which is an informational group where we're going to provide information to all the students under the categories of participant and listeners. I'm going to leave on the chat the information the link of the WhatsApp group chat. Good morning, everyone who's joining already. Class number 1 of this session is actually class 3 of the program. We're going to start with progressive transition. Then we will have a 5-minute break, and we will have a class number 4 and just transition number 2. We're going to talk about communities, local communities, indigenous communities as well. Hello, everyone. Okay, let's get started. We have most of the students in the room. Welcome to all the people from different countries: Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, Brazil, Colombia, Venezuela, Mexico, and many other countries in the region of Latin America and the Caribbean. So welcome, everyone. El Salvador, we have people from the Dominican Republic. I was saying before that I was going to send on the chat, actually it's already on the chat, the link for the WhatsApp group chat, where you are going to receive information of the academia. And for listeners, you're going to receive YouTube Live, who are live. And you will get the information so you can join the WhatsApp group chat as well. Okay, now we are going to have the first class of this session, number 2. And the speaker is a very special guest for us today because she belongs to our organization, our coordinating organization of the academia. This is Gloria Alvarenga. She is a specialist in energy and environment. She has a solid training in policies, energy policies, and she has studies in sustainability and renewables, and works in OLADE, where she is in charge of a boosting key project about a just energy transition for Latin America and the Caribbean. Gloria, please, are you there? Yes, hello, Paz, I'm here. Okay, good morning, Gloria. Okay, let's get started with your class. Okay, I'm going to share now, okay? Sure. Please let me know when you can see my presentation. Please let me know if you can see these presentation mode. Now we can see it. Okay, I'm going to start. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you. This effort has been done through 1.5 of the University of Chile and OLADE in this Energy Transition Academy of Latin America and the Caribbean. Today, we are going to talk a little bit about just transition based on gender. Here is a little bit of my background, as Paz has already explained. And now we are not going to deepen much in this. I'm Gloria Alvarengo. I'm Director of Integration, Access, and Security, Energy Security of OLADE. I am so pleased to be here with you today. and to talk a little bit about energy transitions based on gender. I would like to start by saying that OLADE, who are we and how are we divided? OLADE is an international organization of intergovernmental purpose. We are the Latin American Energy Organization in charge of cooperation, coordination, and technical assistance. And as I said, this is in intergovernmental public nature, where we work with 27 member countries through the Agreement of Lima and its incorporation on November 2, 1973. This is ratified by these 27 Latin American and Caribbean countries in order to foster integration, conservation, rational leverage, trading, and defense of our energy resources in the region. From LATA, we promote the public policies and national policies, effective ones that are addressed to have this rational leverage and to support the different platforms of design and implementation of energy policies of our member countries. As you can see there, we have the bodies of governance. We have the technical bodies of OLADE that fits up the board of experts, which is our second body of governance, and they could do this ongoing work to present in the meetings of the ministries of energy, an event where they come together once a year. This is going to be in the framework of our Week of Energy in Asunción, Paraguay, October 28 to November 1, and you all are welcome to come, and you are invited for the energy transition issues. We're going to talk a little bit about, I don't know why this is not changing. Okay. Just to let you know about our working pillars, here we have these 5 working pillars that currently are being under performance. Here we have the education platform, CAPE-LAG. Here we have around 20,000 users in this platform that you are also using this currently. From these Academia of Energy Transition, we count on a program of energy transition that has 20 instances, courses, training courses, and others. We also have diploma programs, and we have this one, which is one of our treasures at the Academy of Energy Transitions. We also have the system of data of CIELAG, OLADE, together with the 27 member countries, makes available the access to information free of charge. And to tell you that we are the entity of the ruling entity of energy statistics for Latin America and the Caribbean since 1970. We've been 51 years supporting the data and statistics matters through CIELAG, where of course we have topics related to energy balances, greenhouse effect gases, economic energy indicators, etc. With actually, we did some statistics about methane, where we had our first meeting. We installed this methane observatory in Colombia, where this mandate was established by the ministers of energy, supported by all the countries of the region, to identify the technical needs, this collection, follow-up, and supervision of the information about the methane emissions in support to the commitments that we have to reduce the methane emissions in the region. We also count on a CERTI-LAG. A CERTI-LAG is a very ambitious initiative where we support to have these local certification system that can be harmonized, and that we can deliver the tools to the countries to determine the standards and regulations with which we have to abide by with the clean hydrogen and low emissions. And we promote integration as well as joint negotiations to increase competitiveness of the producers in Latin America and the Caribbean. We also have our entrepreneurial council where the next week, in the week of energy, we will have our second entrepreneurial meeting with the regional industry, and we are going to strengthen these bonds here. The goal here is to promote the exchange of cooperation and to have a diagnostic or an adequate diagnostic about the resources and to provide improvements to boost these markets that are integrated, reliable, and sustainable. In Latin America and the Caribbean, to talk a little bit about our region, the energy transition in both regions are visualized as a dynamic and promising process because we have many significant challenges in the region. We are moving forward towards an energy metric that is going to be more sustainable, diversified, and boosted by this growing investment in renewable energies and decarbonization of conventional energies and implementation of more robust policies focused on environment and social matters, and not only economically speaking. As I said, Latin America and the Caribbean is a region that shares a lot in common, but at the same time is quite diverse and heterogeneous. We have vast natural resources, very rich region in energy resources, in diversity, complementarity among the different countries. The countries are transitioning now towards a second phase of energy transition that entails a decarbonization in our electrical demand. These structural changes, in addition, have to overcome these challenges which are common in the region and that we have to face in this sector, with the need of more infrastructure and adequate financing, the integration of state-of-the-art technologies. But all countries are going through critical barriers, such as inequalities, socioeconomic inequalities, regulatory frameworks, outdated ones, and the lack of access of energy in the rural areas. And all these have to be tackled in order to ensure an inclusive and equitable transition. And it's important to mention that there's only one change for energy transition. This is a process that depends on the realities of each one of the countries. And we are working jointly in that regard. I just wanted to mention about the energy picture of 2023 that clearly we are about to share our energy picture 2024. Here we have some statistics that can be very useful for Latin America and the Caribbean. These represent 8.2% of the world population. It is important to say that the countries have a mid-term development, although we have a 14% of renewability in their primary matrix of renewables in Latin America and the Caribbean. It reaches 31% in the contribution, very high in terms of hydro energy. Also, Latin America and the Caribbean represents 8.1% of emissions around the world or globally. And this data can be provided here in our energy picture, Olave. Here, I would like to talk a little bit about this graph. It is quite complex. Many of you who are within the sector and in the engineering areas, you are interested and you like to see this type of graphs. The cup half full, half empty. Because from a reduction of the cost of energy, the primary energy is still fossil fuel, 68%, and 32% renewable energies. Notwithstanding, we talk a lot about energy transition, that we make lots of efforts to accomplish that, and we are working on that in each one of our countries in the region and within OLAD as well by supporting and boosting everything. When we see this current picture, we can see the evidence of the long way that we still have to go. And this slide should be seen as a reality. And if we want to decarbonize this primary energy matrix, we still have a great effort to be done. And I understand that all countries are committed to do so. And we are working a lot. Because in this slide, you can see that 68% of the total energy supply is still dominated by oil, natural gas, and carbon. However, I would like to show you a more optimistic picture in these other graphs. I can mention about a little bit about Latin America and how, compared to other parts of the world, it has a great penetration of renewables at a primary level, thanks to our natural conditions of the region that grants the invaluable richness of energy resources. Here, we can see also in the region, the mineral carbon is not as important as it is around the world. We are privileged to be very rich in natural resources, as I mentioned before. And we can see this on the slide, 14% of renewability, and we have in Latin America and the Caribbean, 31%, turning into one of the greenest regions of the planet. So those who position are solar and wind energies, they grow very fast and they are positioning much faster. In regard to the matrix of electrical generation, the potential of electricity in Latin America and the Caribbean, in terms of renewables, is huge. We've seen a notorious increase throughout the years. Latin America and the Caribbean has this great potential in terms of natural energy resources, and among them, the renewables, of course. But there is an example that I like to mention a lot, and it's just by seeing this potential in the solar energy, for instance, in the northern of Chile, south of Peru, the Caribbean, wind, Brazil, Mexico, and hydroelectrical like Paraguay, Costa Rica. And that's why we have 3 countries that throughout the year, in certain times of the year, can register an electrical generation up to 100% by renewables. Countries like Costa Rica, Paraguay, and Uruguay, for instance, which is important to mention so that you know about this. The potential places us, of course, as a region, in a favorable region, in a region that can assume this world leadership for clean energy transitions. However, reaching this leadership depends on the capacity of the regions to be able to cooperate and innovate and attract investment that will boost this development from our resources. We also have to focus on creating or building these internal capacities and to be able to leverage and exploit all the potential that we may have, understanding that renewables can be the significant source of job creations. These type of efforts, like this academy, for instance, where we can educate and transmit the knowledge and to transfer the knowledge, leads us to be able to do what I was saying in focusing on creating internal capacities. I see some hands raised. I cannot see the chat. So because I'm on my presentation, I don't know if someone can help me out with it. Gloria, please continue with the presentation. And we have about 10 minutes to finish. And then we will have 10 minutes for Q&A for questions and answers. So at the end of your presentation, we will answer the question. Okay, great. So if we talk a little bit about the emissions of the Latin American Caribbean, is 1.1% of emission compared to the rest of the world. This is a contribution in the greenhouse effect gases, but we stand out that our emissions is 49% comes from energy sector. We have to stand out that these path that we still have to go through our sector worldwide, 55% comes from energy, and the world total emissions is 50%. On this slide, we can see most emissions are coming from Mexico and Brazil in our region. And between the two, they represent 60% of all the total emissions that we generate. In Latin America and the Caribbean, 49% of greenhouse effect gases come from this energy sector, and worldwide, as I said, 75%. It is important also to stand out that the efforts that are being made in the energy sector, despite all the consequences or all the implications of that leads us to decrease these world emissions. Also, the great potential in renewables in Latin America and the Caribbean. Here we have a picture of what we have. It is impressive to stand out that we just leverage at 29% of our potential in hydroelectrical power. The South Cone is also interesting to mention that is a potential for wind energy, especially regions like Argentina and Chile. They are the greatest potentials of wind energy in these countries. And this is worth to mention. Also, regions like Peru, Bolivia, Chile have the greatest radiations by the sun. So it's perfect for solar power. We can see how these countries are moving forward in these areas and potential. This represents a great opportunity for the development of new markets. And an interesting market is the green hydrogen market. So I would like to mention that we have started to see many innovative projects in these fields, but we still have a long way to go to have a significant development. Countries like Chile, Brazil, Mexico are at the front lines of these technologies with investment in projects like green hydrogen and storage of energy at large scale. We applaud these countries that, of course, have been doing all the efforts, and we also applaud Latin America and the Caribbean that are trying to add to these efforts on a daily basis. Also, in terms of energy storage, we see a special approach in the circular economy by developing mechanisms and having these recycling processes and reuse processes as well. That allows us to use much better all the resources and to be used throughout its life cycle. So here we have a screenshot of the hydrogen project. Now we are about to finish, but the most important thing here is that we are talking about just energy transition and gender. Although we have to make efforts as much as possible for energy transition in Latin America and the Caribbean, we have a gigantic potential of leadership in these processes. There is a term that has gained momentum in the latest year, which is the just energy transition. In order to accomplish this, we must focus that this should not have any negative impacts upon society groups, especially upon those vulnerable groups. This should be done in such a way that benefits must be shared equitably. And it's here where we have a great opportunity to increase this responsibility and the representation of women at a sector level. We have a great opportunity, historically speaking, to decrease this gap, to close the gap in the gender equality. We also have to focus on the global change where women can have the same opportunities to access these spaces of leadership, just like men. In our OLADE agenda, in terms of gender and energy, our goal is to boost actions addressed to ensure the incorporation of a gender perspective in all activities and operations linked to the energy sector in Latin America and the Caribbean, to promote the gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls in the region. And we have manifested this. This is a ministerial decision in which back in 2022, the ministers of energy fostered these actions to guarantee this gender perspective for all the region. And OLADE has worked on an agenda where I'm give you a brief explanation of our strategic lines that we are working on. technical assistance in the public institutions for design, implementation of policies, plans, and programs, and strategies that incorporate this gender perspective, and to develop specifically for the equality of gender in the energy sector. Also, the capacity building and strengthening the spaces like this in the Academy of Energy Transition provides a space to strengthen these capacities overall, but also focused on gender, specifically by promoting this production, analysis, and dissemination of the statistical information. We're also working hand in hand with Chile, which is a reference country in terms of gender. And they are supporting with different countries of the region where we have a technical working group in Molade in order to promote the gender-based analysis and dissemination of data that is required in this matter. We also have to install the Gender Commission. That was one of our strategic lines. This has been escalated. There are 6 countries of the region that are comprised of the Gender Commission, but there's a technical group of OLADE working on the needs based on gender and energy in the region. Here, well, we have also those who have participated in our session, the OLADE technical group, is important to be mentioned here, and the benefits that we are trying to provide within this technical group to see all the different needs of the countries of the region, to work them and to have this as a unit of dialogue among the countries that comprise it. From OLADE, we've had an online course of executive development in gender and energy called, again, because of the challenges of the energy transition, over 350 women, regionally speaking, put together this development executive program. And we also have another program of leadership and empowerment of women in the energy sector, oriented to the public sector in the governance bodies framework. We also have participated in different events, very specific ones, where they tackle gender equality at sector level, and we drive this to the wake of the energy and other events. Here we have a few key statistics in 1 week. Statistics that promote at this point, regionally speaking, this tells us how we're doing, and women highlights 35 hours a year as a non-paid work at home. Men 12% in their time where it's not being paid as well. It calls our attention that women have 43 weekly hours for non-paid work. It is also interesting to see this type of statistics. Please let me know how much time do I have left. I don't know. You have 5 more minutes. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Okay, let's move on. Here I would like to show you, especially make evident these statistics about men, women in terms of time and average of the household chores without payment. In this average, women dedicate 20% of their time in the domestic work, and men dedicate 8% of their time in domestic work. In countries like Chile, women dedicate up to 24.7% of their time in this household task, and men 10.8%. It's very interesting to see this type of statistics nowadays. It also calls our attention on this graph. The average of women that represent unemployment rate higher than men in 2023, this rate in women was reached 8%, whereas men was 6% of unemployment. So this is a very interesting statistic to see the rate of unemployment. To me, one of the most interesting graphs we can present is the difference in the different academic branches between men and women. They are quite huge. You can see the educational programs that they choose. It is quite evident that in STEMs, science, technology, and mathematics are taking 70%, and it is 70% higher in men. On the contrary, there are other study programs related to health education. Women in these study programs surpass 70% of participation. We can see these roles in the course of time, both men and women. If we just think about this, we can see how, okay, why do I see in this role that there are more women and these roles there are more men? Because of their decisions. However, it is necessary, and one of the roles that we have to do across the region to be able to encourage both men and women and to have all the options to access any study program without suffering any biases, discrimination, or other factors that can influence in this type of decisions. It is also important to boost women and encourage them to enter the STEM study programs, and also men to push them a little bit in the health fields or educational fields, for instance. Here we also have a picture of topics related to the energy sector. Here we see that women represent barely 10 to 23% of the workers in the energy sector. Cooking, for instance, this is a very important data. Biomass cooking generates very harmful emissions. Around 77 million people in Latin America and the Caribbean still use this type of cooking system for their food. Most of them have harmful effects on health. That is, of course, women, as you can see on the picture. We try to show they are usually the ones in charge of these household chores, and this is like a conductive threat. And according to the graduate statistics, because there are different types of fields, women represent 23% who graduate in the IT study programs. With a quick digitization in the sector, again, this would be mostly men who take these type of study programs, because there's not a great representation of women in these type of study programs. Therefore, the statistics should be like equal. We have two more slides. Just two more slides. Please just get a couple minutes. This is one of that I wanted to mention. However, despite the energy transitions, we have this window of opportunity that is very interesting. This is basically what we are going to say to wrap up. The advantages, as I mentioned, is to reduce this dependence of fossil fuels, and to increase energy sovereignty, to lower the dependency of the prices, to mitigate the effects of the environmental impacts and reduction of emissions, and also the reduction of generation prices to allow more access to energy and to create jobs that will boost innovation. And in this last point, to create jobs, boosting innovation, this is very, very important, because here we can decrease this gender gap in the sector. Here on this slide, this is the last slide, the development of new technologies and the opening of new regional and international markets in hydrogen will boost this new job creation. In order to decrease this gender gap, the new markets can present an important space and opportunity for women to be in these spaces in leadership and technical positions that historically have not had a great representation. This in turn requires the capacity building. It's important to see how women are and could be equally in these groups of training. I congratulate the Energy Transition Academy that focus on having a great percentage of women here. And this is plausible because all the initiatives that are being made should come up with this approach and inclusion of women in the R&D teams linked to energy transition matters. But they can also promote this diversity of ideas and innovation, different perspectives that can create more efficient and sustainable solutions. So I'm going to stop here and thank you so much for your attention. Thank you, Gloria, for your presentation. Now we are going to upload to the students folder so that you can review all the presentation. Very interesting. The energy transition based on gender. We have a few questions, but because of time constraints, we are going to read the questions on the chat and to give the floor to those who are raising their hands. That's the first question says, Nina Timura. So she asks, why do you consider this is a historical moment so that women intervene in energy transition? Well, indeed, one of the things that I see the most is why is it important? Because energy transition, now the countries are making efforts, and there is a space so that we can decrease this gap. It is important because we have been making these efforts for centuries, and I think that the youth have made all these efforts trying to understand and visualize that women must be at the same position, under the same positions. It is important also to regard the barriers in terms of STEMs. For instance, it is important to start boosting and to make real effort so women can feel this empowerment and that to understand that they can be part of this energy transition, just energy transition. Yeah. Just 1 minute. We are going to give the floor to Raul. Okay, thank you. Good morning and congratulations to all the organizers and speakers of the academia. Well, actually, these are more concerns and input. We should consider the implementation programs of the culture of energy transition from school, from the early school, because we still have a path of evolution and development of the different energy alternatives. For instance, in countries like Chile, this is well organized and they have made this transition with a greater roadmap where there's a diversity of participation and engagement, where gender equality emerges. And it's the community that is being attended, is being assisted, but also the participation and the consultation of all sectors, the academia, society, public sector, and private sector. So my proposal would be, let's start from early stages in school. Why? Because there are several trades and specialties, professionally speaking, that is going to be required in the energy industry in the different changes that is going through. And lastly, I would like to leave these to contribute to the working proposal. So what do we do with the tons of waste that are going to be produced by photovoltaic energy, the ton of waste, and when they comply with their lifespan, like solar panels and also the lithium batteries? We still have not faced or or tackle these issues directly. What is going to happen with these waste after the lifespan or use? Well, thank you very much. And we have another question on the chat. We want to also listen to some women here because this is gender based. Someone actually raised their hand. Okay, we have on the chat. Adriana, okay. Go ahead, Adriana, please. Thank you so much. Good morning. My question is, I understand the gender issue from the perspective of employment, but what would be the perspective from the professional standpoint? What would be the input? What is the contribution as from the feminine standpoint to have a differential contribution towards this energy transition? Well, just to talk a little bit, we've been working from the region and the incorporation of all the activities with a gender perspective with women and girls. That there's a lot of work to be done, and this should be done from school. Also, Adriana, I think that of course, I think that we must focus, and indeed, I think that both comments are linked in terms of the capacity building, empowerment, leadership. Because the problem that we have right now is very cultural. Women do not believe that they can, or that we can, or they can be part of the most difficult sectors that we have, like mining, energy, water. This is where we have the least representation. So this comes around training, academic, education, empowerment, and leadership that comes from early stages training. So I think that the countries are actually doing the work. There are many communities, and there are many countries focusing on that on the communities in order to deliver this factor. And also, we see a question on the chat about employment and all. And it is that. So these communities, the countries have these pilot projects that they can understand and to make understand that they can enter this system actually. That we all can be in leadership positions and to have this equality and technical position. I think that this is something that should start from bottom to top, and this is a very good moment because in all spaces, as my colleague said in his comment, we've seen the reference of Chile, for instance, but we've seen also the reference in Panama and in their energy policies where they have introduced the gender issue as a basic pillar in this perspective and their energy. Yes, that's right. Just, I will give the floor now to 2-3 more people who have their hands raised. Because this is a gender-based topic. So then, okay, we are going to give the floor to Jorianis. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. We can't hear you. I'm sorry. Okay, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes, we can. Please, Dinesh, you have 1 minute. I work in the oil industry. And I think that I'm on the wrong side here. But our vision as a business is to increase the production of oil because we didn't have, and we have an energy matrix here in Venezuela that is quite stressed on the oil. So I understand that the gender approach and all, and we all focus on trying to visualize that women who are part of this sector, because this is a traditionally masculine sector, but by being within this sector, how could I somehow focus energy transition within the oil industry, because although this is a big matrix, but working within the sector is not our priority. I don't know if if you understand me. How can we do within this strategic sector? What can we do in order to cause an impact and to participate in the energy transition? Well, thank you. Well, there's a very interesting statistics. I don't have it with me right now, but there is an interesting statistic because in the oil sector, the women's statistics are quite low, and who are working, being part of the sector. Although I applaud countries like Peru, where they have a female vice minister in hydrocarbons, for instance, and we are seeing in different parts. In Venezuela, we also have a female vice minister who is taking part of this role. It is quite complex, yes, but we must understand that in order to move forward, we must understand the needs of our countries as well as the economic needs of our countries, and to understand how these needs are being shaped up in order to decarbonize and to action or to act on actions that will decrease the greenhouse effects emissions. But we must understand that there are some economies that makes this a little bit difficult. And this is your case. It's much more complex, much more difficult. And I don't know if here in the academy you can send an email. I would like to send you what we've done today in the oil gas sector in gender issues in order to orientate the statistical issue, because there's a lot of data. Unfortunately, we are quite low in these statistics. We are making the efforts though. But of course, we have very little time here. Maybe we can provide some information to you. We're very pleased to do so from Olade so that you can get some feedback about this issue. Or I can send you pass as well, and perhaps that you can upload on the platform, because perhaps many students would like to know. Okay, thank you. We have now to go to the break, but we're going to give a few 20 seconds of Felipe of a reflection that you wanted to mention. Thank you very much. Yes, also to thank all the speakers and the Olade for this space. I also would like to talk about the importance of including the sex and generic diversities, because sometimes we are in international conventions in regard to gender-based topics. This work circumscribes to women for gender. It has been useful. Very big steps have been taken in that matter, but we still have a long way to go. So I think the conventions of like the working plan of Lima and the Convention of Climate Change that has helped us in Chile. In the case of Chile, this has helped to create tools of management to cross-cut these issues about gender. But also we have other genders that are the sex generic genders are outside of this space. They are considered only when we talk about human rights, but still there's a lot of deficiency in this particularly with the trans binary mentions. They are left aside from the different agenda, public policies, the access to work. And of course, this is an industry that historically has been masculine, and they are also left aside of the possibilities of left out of the possibilities of development. So I think it is important to mention in all the conversation that we have about gender. Another issue that I would like to mention in regard to Chile. Although we have built, particularly in the past 5 to 6 years, many climate management tools, there are a lot of gender issues involved in it. But perhaps some people would say there are too many. And many times we see ourselves with little capacity to land these into the reality, little capacity to supervise this. In the case of lithium, there is something interesting going on because the territories where we can extract lithium and where the spaces where are developing the green hydrogen projects are on the ends of the country, the extremes of the country. There are on communities that are already isolated and that have been victims for so many years of the fossil fuel extractivism. Now we have the opportunity to transition our energy model in a just way. When we talk about just transition, and that tend to politicize the energy transition, but still we have a long way to go to ensure that these participation processes, the consultation mandates. I'm sorry, Felipe, but we have Gloria, and she has to go to another meeting. Gloria, thank you so much for being the speaker of this class and supporting the academia, for being women with a strategic leadership in Latin America. Yeah, thank you. Felipe, I completely agree with you. I think this is a work that we still have to keep doing. We are moving forward good, I think, but it is, of course, oriented more in human rights, but there is also under this umbrella that can land to the different sectors. The important thing here is this is a whole, to understand that, and that all this has to move forward, not only in terms of women, but in a more diverse policy. And just one statistic that I found in the oil and gas sector, that women represent 1/4% of the total of workers in the initial stage of the study program, and that they are represented in technical operational positions. These let us know that the opportunities of the STEM study programs are related. And it is important to know that we must intensify all this. Now, because now that men have a 4 out of 5 positions in leadership positions, I could say it like in Central America, I'm having this leadership role in LADE has a great responsibility, poses a lot of responsibility, and but we must work all together. And it's not just women's work. It is not only the women who create this reality, but it's a task of both men and women to be in the same environment. And as Felipe mentioned, to encourage to all these gender diversity, equality, and equity becomes a whole. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope that I was able to provide interesting data, and whatever information I have in this issue, I will send it out to Paz so she can upload in the platform. Sorry, I have another meeting with the Atomic Energy Organization that are also related to this. Thank you so much. Greetings to everyone. I invite you to follow the social media of OLAD, especially the course offering and the portfolios of courses, webinars within our CAPEPLAG platform, as well as the Energy Transition Academy. We have other portfolios that we can provide free of charge for your academic training and capacity building. Greetings and thank you very much. Thank you, Gloria. Sorry about the time constraints. We're not going to be able to go on a break since we have our second speaker waiting for us, Antonia Reyes. Okay, let's get started without a break. We are moving on to our second class in the session that has to deal with just energy transition, but we're going to focus on local and indigenous communities. So with no further ado, I leave you with Antonia Leje. Has a background in social and physical anthropology, a lot of experience in consultancy, and advises also on the climate adaptation. And she is part of the network of studies of energy policies and poverty energy network. And she is a researcher of this network. Currently, her work is focused on the just energy transition. So her class is going to be very interesting. Okay, go ahead, Antonia. Thank you so much, Paz. I hope that you all are doing well. I'm going to share the screen. Please confirm that you can see and hear me clearly. Okay. As Paz has mentioned, this session is going to be focused on just energy transition related to communities. Paz has already introduced me, and there's not much to deepen into it, but I would like to say what is my positioning so that you can understand what I'm going to talk about. I am in charge of the social studies of energy as well as the political ecology and justice. This conversation is going to focus on the most social aspects of just energy transition. First of all, I'm going to talk about energy transition. This is a multidimensional phenomenon in order to review examples and case studies. Then we are going to focus on the just energy transition, the challenges and opportunities, projections, and I'm going to give you a practical exercise as well. Probably already know a lot about energy transition. Here specifically, I chose sorry for the interruption. I'm sorry. Okay, something's wrong with my computer that sometimes I have these issues. Anyway, as I said, I incorporated a definition of energy transition that refers to the planned conversion of a generation, distribution, storage, and energy consumption processes related to technological rechange that seeks to decarbonize the electrical matrix to reduce the dependence of fossil fuels and mitigate the effects of climate change. This is basically the notion that I work from. And here we have the dimensions of energy transition. And I'd like to start by saying about the studies of transitions overall. This is a research area that puts forward that transitions always accounts for a complex problem, a problem that must be seen from the different perspectives, and that emerges as a response that have to be shaped up through those perspectives. So I would like to say that energy transition does not only have this technological, political, and economic view, but it also has a social and cultural views that we must take into account in this regard. If we want to see changes, and because of these, the response to a very complex problem, which is climate crisis right now, in our actions, we must consider at macro level and how is this going to impact at micro level in the communities as well. When we're talking about planning and energy transition, we must also think on how this is going to impact the local practices, how is this going to impact certain cultural rituals or ways of relation, having relation with energy. And deep inside, I would like for us to understand that these are not secondary elements, but instead they have to be seen as a whole and in its coordination, because people relate to nature with an energy on a daily basis. And these transitions aim at production, distribution, use, and consumption. to stand out on that. Also, this is interactive. I would like for you to turn on your microphones. Can you see the relation between these two? Please open your mics and let me know what are the relation between the electrical transportation and the other one that is not. And the other one that is digging out a resource. Roll. Go ahead. Can you hear me? All right. Good morning. Very interesting. And this type of graphs are the ones that allow us to transport ourselves to it because contradictorily, we have a vehicle in electromobility with less impact of contamination to the environment. And the other one, contradictorily, we can say, well, we can assume that they are digging in a lithium mine. But of course, they are using diesel for the vehicle. It's very good for reflection. Thank you. Thank you, Paul and Raul. Yes, thank you. That's what I wanted to aim at because when we talk about transition, is this notion of the trade-offs. And the electromobility case, I think it is quite graphic for that purpose. Before deepening here, I would like to, okay, Felipe Andres, you have your hand raised. Yes. Good morning, everyone. Yes, in my case, I'm going to make an analogy that perhaps can be relevant. In our energy matrix, this is diversified, right? Because we need different supports in and the reserve that needs certain units that should be synchronized with the turbines or any rotatory huge machine. So I could say that the machine based on oil can probably condition in some carbon field, but they're looking for electricity purposes. I see actually the end use of energy. I do not take charge of the origin. Therefore, it is not necessarily whether it's electrical and it does not contaminate, but the value chain of energy to reach to that end. Yes, thank you, Felipe. Yeah, someone else. Yeah. No, I can't remember Olivia. Yes, I concur with what Felipe is saying. In our country, we have energy matrix that is built on the thermal electricity, and we are promoting other types of energy. But where does electricity come from, really? You are filling up an electromobility with an energy source that is highly contaminant. Yes, thank you, Maria del Carmen. It's very interesting what you just mentioned because the next example is going to be in that same line. I think Geoffrey, okay, you have your hand raised. Yes. When I see this graph, I have a doubt. Let's say that perhaps we're seeking lithium because this is contradictory because you produce lithium for the electrical batteries of the vehicles, but sometimes we forget that these batteries are highly contaminant. Perhaps this impacts our water sources. So I have this doubt. How do you see this? Yes, right. I wanted to highlight something that Felipe mentioned, I believe, and that he said the productive chains, and that relates also to what Geoffrey mentions. When we talk about energy transition, it's very complex because there are many perspectives that we must take into consideration. It's a long way. That's why we talk about the trade-offs. In the end, this is like a balance or unbalance on how they are affecting when producing energy. So the right image indeed shows us how we are exploiting lithium. And on the left, there is a bus of electrical bus. So I wanted to show these a slide to show you about the trade-offs and to talk specifically about the communities which are in the triangle of lithium here in South America. I am from Chile. I think I didn't mention that, but I wanted to mention a little bit about this because on these territories, we have these resources concentrated, and nearly 10 years, both the communities and the academia have mentioned about this type of exploitation. This has we have manifested how these risks arise, this way of production, and how these can have some implications locally and globally. These are the new ways of extractivism that are being implemented. And as I said, these was coming because currently we see the effects both on the environment and socially speaking. In the communities right now, there are some researchers in my area that have been working to see the conflicts that are happening within the communities because of the lithium production. Particularly, we have the case of San Pedro de Atacama, where we have the Canantay community, where they have a certain breakups because some are in favor, others against the lithium production. The companies have already installed on site, physically speaking, and also in talking about power. So what I mean by this is that we can see this electromobility as a strategy, but it also has impacts on contamination and in terms of location as well. And we're going to talk about these are the trade-offs of energy transition. Please let me know how many minutes do I have in order to have 10 minutes. Okay, great. Okay, in regard to the labor field, in all these slides, I wanted to mention about these issues, these different perspectives. On the labor side, we have these green jobs that are being created. Sometimes in the national registries, we see that there are new industries, a new job, and we are fostering jobs, but fostering employment. But we have evidence that in the latest years, the green jobs have a characteristic that has to deal with the little security that they have because they have very specific timelines that very few people, the personnel is reduced when we go from thermoelectrical to photovoltaic park, which is a strategy that is being carried out currently, the transfer of knowledge from one to another. We reduce the human resource that we require. So there's this ambiguity because we are creating employment and job positions, but this can be less stable, less secure, and of course, this is going to impact the communities where these projects are being installed. On the other hand, macroeconomics, there is a greater investment, of course, in renewables, and we can see that this has been consolidated as an important economic sector. Countries are aiming at developing their industries of green energies. So, and we are going upwards in that regard, and that's what's being discussed here in the economy. And it was great to have this comment before. On the one hand, we try to reduce the emissions of greenhouse effect and also the dependence on fossil fuels. But there is an issue that is not discussed much yet. And when we are implementing all these forms of energy, for instance, solar energy, I don't know if you are aware of these, but the lifespan of panels is around 40 years. So it happens that we are transitioning the forms of energy to reduce on the one hand, but in 40 years now we are going to bump into another problem. So what do we do with all these materials? So it is important to check these points constantly in terms of the works of life. There is something currently happening that has to deal with the fact that the communities are measuring certain, they're measuring the detail, the displacement, and they're ending the labor offers, for instance, places that depend on the hydrocarbon production. Also, in the previous case, when I was talking about the Kanantai community, this community in particular has certain rituals of irrigation and the use of water channels. And these new companies come into these locations that they say, okay, so that you, in order to make our companies work, we have to channel these resources. So you can see that there are two different visions on how the water is going to be managed, and these also change the lifestyles locally. I don't know if this is understood, but I also wanted to mention, I see a few hands up. I'm going to finish my presentation and we can discuss. In the case of, for instance, we can see when the power plants are closed, there is a phenomenon that is not discussed either. It is close unemployment increases in a community, and at the same time, it increases the levels of intrafamily violence. Many times this has to deal with the fact that the impacted people cannot manage frustration, anger, economic problems, etc. So I would like to evidence how some things are not so linear, but this is a chain of effects. I'm going to talk about Tocopilla, Chile, which is the first location where carbon power plants were closed in 2019, where they started the decarbonization strategy. Tocopilla is a location that is in the northern part of Chile, and this is 190 kilometers of the Antofagasta region, which is the Antofagasta is the capital of the region. This is a very remote area, desert base. It's a desert and it is marginalized. Let's say this is the first location where they close the carbon plants in Chile. And we can see the impact that it has had. And upon this matter, I wanted to mention that this is a very contaminated area. This was a saturated area. It is like a tank that is delivered here in Chile, where they have high levels of atmospheric contamination. This was carried out but this was not welcomed by the community because one of the central activities or the core activities was the energy production based on thermal electrical plants. So this leaves us as a lesson and consideration that it's very important that when we start planning all these measures, we must do this in time with dialogue with the communities. And when I mean dialogue, I think that in the previous session, some people mentioned about this. This participation must be binding because when we have these spaces of conversation with the different sectors, there are certain voices that are not taken into account when carrying out all these plans, policies. We create this distance. And in the case of Tocopilla, this condition of marginalization started to deepen. A lot of people had to migrate this side to seek new jobs elsewhere. And in the end, we can see that impacts can happen in different perspectives. So taking these elements under consideration, we see the ambivalence or ambiguity of the energy transition and its impact. Then the question is, how can we make this more just? How can we move forward if we know that this is already happening? First of all, I wanted to discuss a little of those who talk about justice, those who talk about the just transition, were the labor movements around the 70s in England. They started from justice consideration based on that let's not anyone behind, where we needed to think about the labor rights and the capacity building. Also, the environmental movements, the justice is more focused on the environmental relief and health and have equitable access to services. And these also accounts for a problem that is being recognized by the local community. And that's where this is positioned. Then, as from the academia, the justice approach is based on the analysis of the equitable distribution of costs and benefits related or connected to the production, use, and distribution of energy. This is also related to the political ecology, that's where I'm talking from, and also from the institutional policy. We understand that this is a response of this institutional policy to all these other three movements that I just mentioned. And this is focused on participation, on listening to the people, collecting information, knowing that there is a movement being managed about justice. I also wanted to show this slide because within the matter of environmental issues, we must take into account environmental justice. Therefore, this puts forward that there is a responsibility for the social and environmental inequalities when we are talking on the transition towards economies or low carbon economies. We have to understand this problem that there are inequalities. These are not distributed equally in the population and territorially speaking either, in order to prevent the impacts on health. And also the environmental impact and for environmental relief and the distribution of costs and benefits to be equitable as well. And when the damages have been very profound, in the end, we must tackle these to improve them. As from climate justice, we talk about the recognition of risk and responsibilities. Where do they come from? In order to propose certain plans for mitigation and adaptation on climate change and the distributive dimension of the causes and how we can address this. Also, energy justice is the last one that I wanted to mention, that energy production should be based on low carbon sources to ensure reliable energy access and to be efficient and to overcome poverty energy issues. Energy poverty issues. And to wrap up, energy justice also puts forward that costs must be distributed as well as benefits equitably in the population and territorially speaking. And also for procedures to guarantee that decision making should be more open to the public, to have the representation of different stakeholders, and then to recognize that energy systems historically have impacted the mostly poor, vulnerable, and marginalized communities where these spaces occur, like the Copilla, as well as the indigenous communities. So we have lots of challenges that we need to overcome for the just energy transition. I would like to mention a couple of them because this discussion can be long-winded, really. But we have the binding participation here when we are creating instances of discussion where we invite the different sectors and different stakeholders. The idea is for this participation to be reflected upon the decision-making for planning, implementation, but also the follow-up. So in this regard, I would like to highlight that participation should always, or engagement should always be binding. Also, we have the consideration and the and addressing the differentiated impacts. As I said, energy transition is given because there's no equitable distribution. So we have to develop a strategy that this repair seeks tackle the different impacts to communities that have been historically affected, but others that can be impacted currently with the new renewable energy projects. Then we have another challenge that is core and deep, which is the multi-sectorial coordination dialogue. How can we coordinate, articulate what's the common language that we are going to use to make decisions? Then I understand that this academy is really good because it allows us to see the different perspectives and to be able to build a joint horizon and also the multi-scale approach to decisions that I already mentioned. But the idea is to integrate the long-term vision and the long-term effects and to integrate the territorial vision on how we can make decisions. Here in Chile, it's not going to be necessarily applicable to Colombia and other countries. We must have the notion that although we have initiatives that we can take from other countries, we must adjust and adapt to each one of the territories. This nationwide, regionally, and in the different communities. Within the opportunities for the just in we have the integration of the intersectional perspective through the integration of the sustainable development goals. In this, I wanted to stand out a few topics, but there are so many more, which is to aim at a decent horizon. Here we can strengthen the renewable energies to create decent jobs together with what the ILO proposes. Also, the integration of the indigenous communities and the ancestral knowledge when planning, not just to focus on doing a hierarchy of knowledge, but to integrate in the discussion other types of knowledge. Also, gender equity that has already been discussed previously. But I think that these can be tackled in two ways: gender equity in leadership roles and positions in the STEM areas, but also on how we can have notions on how to carry out these transitions so that discussions should not be male based, but also the ecosystemic approach. I was not able to deliver this much in the presentation, but in the end, we must understand that it's not only the communities and the industries. It's not only about the communities and industries. We must understand this environment as something that we must integrate in these discussions. And finally, the projections. What's the direction of the just energy transition? Where are these conversations heading to? In the case of Chile, we're currently developing a socio-ecological strategy that is just to refer to the different transitions that we can carry out in order to tackle the climate crisis and where it is, and also the socio-ecological crisis, because it is put forward that there must be a balance between what I just mentioned, the well-being of communities on the one hand, the ecosystemic balance on the other hand, and finally to aim at developing productive models that can be sustainable in time. I'll leave you some recommended bibliography, deepen much more in this topic. For the specific activity, we have a link where you can have this. I think that this is going to be uploaded in the folder of the students. The practical exercise is what I mentioned. You can apply this in group works. You can discuss about the impacts and this ambiguous vision of a just transition, energy transition, case of your territory or any other territory that you are aware of. Thank you so much. Okay, pass. Thank you so much for the presentation. You left us a lot of questions within us, but that's great. Thanks for also the material so that the students can find out about the answers. Thank you. Antonio is going to be in the library. And we would like to hear you, like Antonia provided that space in order to have this dynamic conversation among us. I'm going to give you the floor now so that you can also put forward your questions. I hope this can be just 1 minute questions, please, because we have 7 minutes to close the session. Thank you. Please, Fernanda Perez Cruz, go ahead. Hello, I'm talking from Santiago de Chile. Thank you so much to Antonia's presentation. Just to complement a little, I think that within the discussion with the territory, it is necessary the participation of technical staff, because in the case of the use of the channeling of a river, there is technology to take the salt of seawater, but this can be an alternative to reach some agreements with the territories. But since this is expensive, these projects do not consider it. So a little bit to discuss with the industries in order to incorporate these type of alternatives to be able to take care of the territory, that basically. Go ahead, Antonio. Okay. I completely agree with Fernanda. I think it is important that within discussions we integrate both the technical issues as well as the communities and all stakeholders to make a joint proposition so it makes sense. Now I'm going to give the floor to Clever from Ecuador. Good morning, everyone. My name is Clever Vargas, and I live in the Amazon region of Ecuador. I belong to an indigenous community, which is the Quichua indigenous peoples. I am an oil in renewable energies and have a major in energy matters. Thank you for the presentation. I think that I can talk from the indigenous territory. This all looks like an imposition. So all the pillars that you have used when you talk about the technical, political, and economic, social, and cultural aspects, especially in my country, where the social and cultural aspects is not considered or used at all, they just see how the indigenous communities, wherever the territory is, that's where the resources are, and if they have experience, perhaps that they can just guide us because they know the territory. However, there is something important to understand that these anthropological studies and social studies as well, to understand these perspectives in such a way that one of the questions that I have always posed to myself is how can we put all these pieces here and to implement them within legal frameworks so that these become energy policies? Because when we're talking about communities, we always talk about the granting benefits, but they does not have any big scope. They're not comprehensive. They don't have benefits. With so many problems that we go through, I think that this is not just about preserving the environment, as you just mentioned. I mean, we have the economics, health, education. As you just mentioned, we must listen to everyone. So, with all this, having said this, my question is how the governments or the communities we can have this type of empowerment in order to reach a dialogue table where we can make decisions. Because I can talk this from my territory, all the initiatives that we all have, the communities in general, they see this as an imposition where perhaps there are stakeholders from the communities themselves that is not only about experience or ancestral knowledge or experiences. This should be a technical knowledge, and this could work much better. And it's not because I want to brag, but we can be a perfect example. I was marginalized, for instance, from education. Sorry, from education because I was an indigenous from the Amazon region. I am only in biology and environmental engineering, but I want to understand this, and I understand will all these challenges go to, and we have opportunities in this just transition as indigenous peoples. But I think that the entire Amazon region, I am one out of three who are thinking about these issues. Thank you. It's so important, clever what you just mentioned. I think we've been working as a region to have a more integrating view in terms of indigenous peoples and gender. But it is very interesting to hear you that you're representing your community with the scientific interest. Antonia, please provide him your feedback, and then we have 5 more minutes. Thank you so much for your comment and your question as well. I think that there is not just one question, and I cannot even either provide the solution, but what you just mentioned, I think that in order to accomplish, to establish some dialogue with the political counterpart, it is very important to create jointly. We must establish dialogues with our own communities first. That's the first thing to do. And then to have these visions, it's very important that you talk about that the environmental sciences. We must talk about with those economics, engineering, social sciences, so that together we can put together something and say, okay, if this is not working, how can we tackle it? How can we address it? So perhaps you see that you don't see the solution. You say that you don't see the solution, but we start with dialogues. Even these are territorial communities or people who are interested in these themes and topics. I think that in this regard, perhaps in Ecuador, this is resonating to many people, and we should start dialogues to see and to seek the just once this is put together, we can raise all these concerns to the political representatives. But this basically, this is perhaps this is something that we can't establish. Okay, the last question that with Carlos Andres. I think that he has raised his hand already. Carlos. Okay, let's move on to Angie Bermudez. Thank you for the presentation. Excellent presentation. I wanted to ask, of course, we're talking about indigenous communities and gender topics in this session, but I would like to have like this complete intersectionality as an engineer working in energy matters in Chile, but I am Colombian. Let's say that the migration issues is also interesting. I wanted to ask Antonia, within this energy transition that you are working in, is this an issue to integrate the migrating communities within all this work? And I think that the short answer is, well, right now I'm not working with migrant communities, but I think it is fundamental in the case of Chile, particularly when I was studying in Tocopilla. One of the topics was that those who believe that the energy poverty, Tocopilla was the migrating community because they came here, they have no material conditions to make use of the energy matrix regularly. In this regard, I completely agree with you that it is necessary to have this crossing of intersectionality. It is essential. I have not done this, but I rescue this issue, and it is important to create dialogues among the people who are working on migration issues and transitions as well. In the end, I want you to take away that we must coordinate and articulate with each other and to be in touch with each other. I have not seen all the chat paths. Could you please send me a copy of the chat? Because I see that there are some things that have been discussed in the chat. So please send my email so that we can keep in touch. Yes, we are going to put together the entire all discussions, questions. We have your email. We will send you to you. Thank you so much for the presentation, and thank you for joining us in this academy. I know this is a will to be here and very interesting. The topics that you develop as a researcher. So have a wonderful day, Antonio. Thank you for joining us, and thank you everyone for being here. We're closing the session now. I know that you have doubts about the class and the academy itself. Please send your questions by email or the WhatsApp chat. We are going to upload some information as well. Antonio, thank you so much. And we are closing and saying goodbye to the session. And if anyone has a specific doubt about the academy, please send on the chat. I think that there is a representative for all the questions. But thank you also for the interpreters, both Portuguese and English. Thank you for interpreting for the YouTube Live and the Zoom sessions. Thank you very much. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Recording stopped.